As Nigeria ushers in the new year, the new tax laws officially come into effect. President Bola Tinubu reiterated that the new tax regulations will take effect as planned from January 1, 2026. His declaration came despite criticism from opposition political parties and other concerned groups. Opposition parties accused Tinubu of pushing ahead with the new law's implementation date primarily to boost government revenue rather than protect the interests of ordinary Nigerians. However, Tinubu in a statement also gave an assurance that his administration will be willing to work with the National Assembly to quickly resolve all issues identified in the course of implementing the new tax laws. Joining us on the show to discuss the new tax laws, which come into effect today, is Professor Ahmed Dogarawa, Professor with the Department of Accounting, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, and the former Head of Department of Accounting and Deputy Dean of ABU Business School. Good morning, Professor Dogarawa, and thank you so much for joining us. Happy New Year.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for having me on this call.
Well, Prof, the tax laws have been very controversial. First, the debate was about VAT and the argument about derivation. That was resolved. And then the latest thing is this allegation by Honorable Dasuki from Sokoto PDP. And then discrepancies, allegations of wrong copy being gazetted. Although the tax authorities have said, no, that is not true. It is misinformation. Do you know what exactly is the issue, and what do you recommend as a way out of this impasse? And then, of course, the general debate about what is actually even now in the laws, with people bringing up their own interpretations, including those who may not even have read the official gazette on the 4 tax laws.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you once again for having me on this call. Let me start by saying that, yes, most of the issues observed during the consideration of the bills have been resolved, especially issues that have to do with the distribution of VAT revenue, that is value-added tax, as well as the VAT rate itself. But after that, we heard from people, including some members of the 2 chambers, that there are allegations of insertion, inclusions, subtractions, and so on in the Gazetted Act. So as a Nigerian and someone who has contributed to the debate while the bills were being considered up until the time they were passed by the 2 chambers, and I was also one of those Nigerians who made presentations during the public hearing in the 2 chambers. So I took it upon myself to go through the Gazetted Acts with a view to comparing between the votes and proceedings of the 2 chambers on the one hand, and on the other hand, the gazetted copy of the especially Nigeria Tax Administration Act. So when I went through this act, I discovered, when I compared between the votes and proceedings of the House of Representatives with the Gazetted Act, I discovered about 28 discrepancies from Section 1 to Section 100 of the Act. But I then got the copy of the votes and proceedings of the Senate, since it was not only the House of Representatives that considered and passed the bill, but also the other chamber, and that is the Senate. and then they came up with a harmonized version which was transmitted to the presidency. I can tell you that I was not able to lay my hands on the harmonized version, I mean the certified true copy of the harmonized version. However, I relied on the two documents, votes and proceedings from the two chambers. And when I compared these two documents with the signed law, I noticed that there are still some discrepancies. For example, if you take Section 3, subsection 1 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act, one would see a kind of change which probably some may not see it as, or may not consider it as substantive or substantial, but in tax matters, it is substantive actually. In that section, Section 3, subsection 1, according to the version of votes and proceedings from the House of Representatives, it says under Roman 5, as contained in this bill, being. So being was used there, and then it now mentioned or listed out the types of tax that fall under that subsection. But for the Senate votes and proceedings, one would look, if one look at subsection 5 or subsection 1, Roman 5, one would not see that provision at all. And then in the gazetted copy, one would see a little change, a little tweak, which has some implications when it comes to administration of tax matters. It says, as contained in this act, including. Now, being was replaced with including. And by including, it means the list is not exhaustive. Whereas the version from the House of Representatives use the term or the word being, meaning making it exhaustive, so that anything outside it is not part of it. But from what we read or what I saw in the gazetted copy, it was changed to including, meaning it is inexhaustive and that more and more taxes or types of income can be included. This is one of the discrepancies. Although, as I said, this may not really matter much to many people because they may see it as non-substantive, non-substantial. But as I said, when it comes to administration of taxes, it matters a lot because they have created a kind of lacuna or a kind of room and opportunity for the tax authority or the government to just insert or include as many other levies or taxes as they wish without going through the process of the legislative procedure. That is just one. But then more seriously is the issue of the list that is found in Section 3, subsection 1B of the same Nigeria Tax Administration Act. In that section, if one takes the two votes and proceedings from the two chambers, one would see that under that subsection B, for the votes and proceedings of the House of Representatives, 5 items were listed under that. But the same provision is not actually found in the votes and proceedings from the Senate chambers. However, from the gazetted copy, one would see that 2 out of the 5 items listed there have been deleted. The issue of petroleum resources and VAT, value added tax, have been delisted or deleted from the list of 5 items that are found in the votes and proceedings version of the House of Representatives. Now, if one look at this, one will see that one, the gazetted copy is actually not using or did not use the copy from the House of Representatives. And then the one from the Senate is not even carrying that provision at all. So this, to me, is a very serious discrepancy, more especially that allowing these 2 items to be deleted, even though they are already listed under Section 3, subsection 1, Roman 5, petroleum resources and VAT are already there. And now under their administration, these two items have been deleted. This creates a kind of lacuna, even though I'm not talking or speaking as a lawyer, but that's the truth of the matter, because it means there is a lacuna, and we are not aware of any reason or justification for the deletion of these two items, more so that it amounts to tempering or altering what was passed by the House of Representatives, even though it is not even available in the copy of the votes and proceedings from the Senate. Okay. So on and on, there are a number of discrepancies that one can actually find.
Okay. So what you're saying is based on your observation. Pardon? So what you're saying is based on your observation of the proceedings in the National Assembly, since you haven't seen the harmonized, certified true copy of the harmonized bill, right?
Yeah, it is very clear that whatever is the content of the harmonized copy is a product of the two votes and proceedings. So they cannot go outside the votes and proceedings to come up with any new version of the document for transmission to Mr. President. Because the rule is that...
Yes, Mr. Professor Dogarawa, there's still a little comma, because you cannot say authoritatively until you see what was signed off by the National Assembly, right? But beyond that, I just wanted to throw that in, just so that we know that as at yet, we are not yet able to have a copy. And we have called out to the National Assembly themselves to release what it was that they passed, just in the interest, in public interest, and just for us to be able to compare. We've seen the gazetted copy, what we need to see to ascertain, and even as the investigation is ongoing. But your thoughts are well taken. What I want to ask you, though, is that in the President's speech, he said that some of the things that were highlighted were not significant enough to disrupt the start day of the tax law from taking effect, which is today. From what you have said, you don't agree with him because there were significant things in the portion that ought not to have been inserted, right? That's number one. Number two is that, what is your take as a professor, on whether or not this new tax law favors the poor and the most vulnerable in society, which is one of the things or the arguments they put forward about this law?
Thank you very much. But before I answer your question, let me go back a little bit to clarify some issues. The examples I cited with Section 3, subsection 1, Roman 5, and Section 3, subsection 1b may not really be seen or considered as substantial enough to warrant the ongoing debates. However, let me clearly state that there are other sections which I did not mention. For example, in Section 41, subsection 8 of the same Act, Nigeria Tax Administration Act, when I compared between the three documents I mentioned earlier, the version from the House of Representatives does not even contain that subsection 8 at all, whereas the version from the Senate has that section, and 20% has been included in the section as a requirement for any taxpayer who is not satisfied with the ruling of the tax tribunal and wants to go on appeal, that he must deposit 20% of the amount that is in disputation before that appeal will be filed and heard. This is there in the Senate version of the votes and proceedings. It is also there in the gazetted copy. However, following the cries as well as the allegation of alteration, the Fiscal Reform Committee went to change that same subsection 8 by removing 20%, that 20% that has been included, which has a very serious implication on ordinary Nigerians, because it is a step forward towards denying them the right to justice. and that it trumps on the rule of law. So therefore, because of that, they quickly went and expunged that 20%. And that is why if you now check the website of the fiscalreform.ng, the copy you would see, which they say is the now corrected copy or the original authenticated copy, you would realize that that 20% is missing, even though it is in the gazetted copy that was earlier made available through the Ministry of Information. So you can see that even the federal government itself is really convinced that there are so many issues that have a lot of implications on the poor Nigerian. Not only that, if you check Section 60, subsection 1, and Section 61, subsection 4, you would see where the oversight of the judiciary is completely deleted in this act. In Section 60, subsection 1, there is the provision that whenever there is, appointment of an agent requires a written notice or order from a high court. It is there in the votes and proceedings of the two chambers. However, this has been replaced with another thing. It says without any notice from a court, which has a lot of implication on the taxpayer. In addition to that, when it comes to the issue of assets distraint, and in the event where the asset is to be sold, according to the two chambers, there is a need for a court order, but this has been changed. It is now stated in the gazetted copy without any court order, if that matter is between the taxpayer and the Nigeria Revenue Service Board. However, if it is between the taxpayer and any state tax authority, it requires a court order. So you can see this is a very serious thing because it tramples on the rights of individuals to seek justice in a court of law. So this cannot be dismissed as non-substantial or non-substantive changes. They are truly substantive changes. The last example I will give before I still go back to your question is the provision of Section 39, subsection 3 of the Act. In that subsection, we see discrepancies in the three documents. For example, the votes and proceedings copy of the House of Representatives mentioned that in the events where petroleum resources, that is where a transaction involving petroleum resources is carried out in a particular currency, then the return from that currency, from that transaction is to be made using the same currency. However, in the copy of the Senate chamber, we see that they mention that it should be in US dollar. Now, in the gazetted copy, we see a different thing because there is an insertion. They inserted another thing that all computations relating to tax shall be in US dollar. Now they added tax in between, and that has a lot of legal implication according to lawyers. So this means that there are substantial changes. That is in addition to the fact that procedurally or constitutionally, the presidency or Mr. President, according to what the lawyers told us, has no right to alter anything. He has only two options, either to assent to the laws, to the bills as passed by the two chambers, or withhold his assent and then return the bills back to them with explanation. But what we see here is a lot of alterations. If you go through the act, you will see a lot of changes. A lot. Some of the changes may be grammatical, some may have some implications legally, but then there are a few things that have a lot of implications on the citizens. Now, coming back to the question you asked, yes, many people don't understand the workings of taxation. And because they do not understand the workings of the tax system, they are making comments without really understanding the import and implications of the provisions of this new act. I can say truly that if you look at it on paper, there are a lot of benefits and advantages associated with the new law, especially for low and middle income salary earners, because in the old law or tax law, which is probably before today was in use, and maybe from today the new law may be implemented. Now going through the old laws, one would see that yes, there is what is called Consolidated Relief Allowance, CRA, for salary earners. So if you, if the gross, for example, if the gross income of an employee is, let's say, 5 million naira per annum. Now, before tax will be calculated, first, that consolidated relief allowance will be deducted because it is tax. It is not tax deductible. It is a relief that he enjoys. So it is either 200,000 naira or 1% of the annual gross income, whichever one is higher. And for most income earners, as well as middle salary income salary earners, it is the 200,000 naira that is usually used, because 1% of their gross annual income is not up to 200,000 naira. So you have 200,000 naira plus 20% of the gross, the annual gross income. Add together, that is what is not included in the calculation of tax. So when you remove this, you deduct this, then you now begin to talk about what is due based on the bands that have been provided in the old tax. Of course, there are other deductions. For example, maybe NHIS, house, the house levy, and so on. They are all deductible. You have to deduct them before you begin to compute the tax. But in the new tax now,
okay, go ahead, finish the point.
Yes, I can hear you.
Go ahead, just finish that point in the new tax now.
Okay, in the new tax law now, this CRA has been, abolished. It's no longer there. There is no consolidated relief allowance. However, they have now replaced that consolidated relief allowance with rent relief. So depending on the rent one pays, at least 20% of the rent is now exempted from tax, subject to the maximum of 500,000 naira, because it has been capped at 500,000 naira. So first, for example, if one's gross income per annum is 5 million naira, first, this issue of rent allowance or rent would be 20% of the total rent one pays per annum will be deducted. It is exempted from tax. Plus the 800,000 naira, threshold, which is also exempted. So if you take anybody, including, for example, Nigerian professors who teach in public higher institutions, if you take the new rate and compare it with the old rates, or compare the new tax law with the old tax law, definitely they have some relief, because they will pay less tax as against what they are being charged. Because of that 800,000 naira exempt clause or exempt band, that has actually helped. Even though the rent that is now exempted from tax is very small, but because of that 800,000 naira, they stand to benefit a lot.
Okay, Prof, can you hear me?
Yes.
Real quickly. Do you have an harmonized document that you can drop with us here where you itemize all these discrepancies and the work you did on these tax laws? Can I get that document? Can we get that document? Because of television, you'll not be able to expound on all of that. Yes, you can get it after this program. Okay, if you can send it to me so that we can make public.
Yeah, after this program, I can share it with you.
Okay, so just share it with me after the program so we can make public to Nigerians.
Share it with you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Professor Hamad Dogarawa, for your time.
Prof, but before we go, what do you recommend? Because the discrepancies you say...
There is one point that is also very important.
What? We don't have more time, but what do you recommend?
Can I go on?
Yes, but briefly, you have less than a minute.
What I'm recommending is that as it is now, many people have actually raised their observations. They made a lot of observations, and they also raised or expressed their displeasure with the attitude of the federal government that whatever it is, there is no going back. It has come to stay. They will not listen to the voice of Nigerians. I think this is not good, especially for an administration that's always talking about the rule of law and the objective of the tax being to protect the poor and give him some succor.
No. They had public hearings, and I'm sure as a As an academic who is interested in the subject, you probably were, at the public hearing. But talk around the whole idea of reform.
No, I was at the public hearing. I'm not talking about
so don't say they don't want to hear
procedure.
from
I'm talking
the
about
people.
now, after the law has been gazetted.
But those discrepancies, if there are any, can be corrected. Whatever discrepancies anybody is pointing to can be corrected. But as an academic, what do you think of the whole idea of reform as a principle? Of tax reform?
No, reforms are good, provided they are meant to actually serve the interest of the common man and the larger society. So reforms are good. Without reforms, there cannot be development. We definitely need reforms. And in terms of tax reforms, they are actually, timely, because we cannot continue to live in the era of the 60s and 50s. We still have taxes that are denominated in either coins or in kobos. So it means we are really, these reforms are timely and we definitely need them. But what is important is for the reformers or those advocating for the reform to actually comply with the principles of equity and beneficial tax system, because without it, people will definitely not know the importance of these reforms. For example, where maybe you have some kind of reliefs and making it much easier for the salary earner to pay less now, but that is on paper, because these tax bands have not been indexed against inflationary pressures. So if you look at what we are facing today in terms of inflation, whatever is the gain will just be gulped by the inflationary pressure that the country is facing.
Thank you,
so
Prof.
It is not just on paper that we say there is relief, there is this, there is that, but also going forward to work it out in a manner that it will be beneficial in all its ramifications.
Okay, thank you, Prof. The test of any law is in its implementation. That's a basic principle. Thank you very much indeed.